Scams in Shanghai. Let me tell you how I got scammed in Shanghai for the first time 9 years ago. I had just moved from another city, Nanjing more specifically, and I was just hanging out with my friends. Back in the day, my friends and I met this guy that goes by the name of Brian, and we met him around 2018, I think, and this famous club in Found 158. He was Chinese, and we thought he was a very interesting guy. He was fluent in English, and he started doing magic tricks, and that really caught our attention at the time. And honestly, he seemed like a friendly person, just trying to have fun. But then, when the party was over, he said, "Hey, I know a place." Um, what happened afterwards is something that I could have never imagined, and I'll tell you more about that later. But as for now, the reason why I'm bringing up scams is because there are a lot of videos about scams in China, but I don't think there are many videos lately about the details of how the scams go, more specifically here in Shanghai. And the way people get scammed in Shanghai is very particular. And there are specific places where you're more likely to get scammed. And now I think it's worth talking about this because a lot of students, workers, and tourists are coming to Shanghai, and I think like most of the times, people don't have to worry about scams in Shanghai because it's a very safe place. But I think that more and more I hear from people on the internet or friends of friends getting scammed, and I think that there are ways to avoid getting scammed, and sometimes people will take advantage of you in ways that you never imagined. So I think it's just a matter of being aware of the kind of tricks out there, and you'll be fine. So let's start with the bunt, also known as white tan in Chinese. This is one of the places where certain kind of scams happen, but it's not super common, but it's also not unheard of. So the thing is that many Chinese, out of curiosity, they like taking pictures with you because maybe they've never seen a foreigner before, or because you're too tall, or maybe your Western features are amusing for them, and that's fine. But the thing is that you know s- sometimes there's some rare cases when Chinese people approach you out of the blue, and sometimes that could be the setup for a scam. For instance, a common scam involves Chinese women approaching foreign men, especially those who have Western features. It's just too obvious for them that you're a foreigner. Or usually, it's a pretty young girl who claims to be a tourist, traveling alone or with friends, but her friends are nowhere to be seen. And she might invite you to a tea ceremony, bar, KTV, or restaurant, which is a classic scam. And what happens next is that you're taken to a place where you are served overpriced tea or drinks, and the bill ends up being outrageous. They might even get you totally drunk before presenting the bill to you. Now, in the daytime, scams are less common, but you might encounter people trying to sell you counterfeit products or gadgets or things of very little value. And I'll show you in a bit. And if you're interested in buying something, that's fine, but be aware that the price might not reflect the actual value of the item. This often happens in places like the fake market and the Shanghai Museum of Science and Technology's metro station, where bargaining is the only way not to get ripped off. But sometimes it can happen right here in Nanjing Donglu or East Nanjing Road, and they might sell you any kinds of products like watches, especially watches. I don't know why. I guess there's a market for that because they keep selling them, so it must mean someone is buying them. But they also offer you all kinds of services, if you know what I mean, especially during the night. Speaking of fake markets, I remember one time I went to a fake market to buy some clothes, and I thought speaking Chinese could make things easier. But to my surprise, it actually made it harder. Some vendors seemed hesitant to do business with me because they realized I could speak Chinese. And I think it's because, they assume that if you speak the language, you're less likely to fall for the tricks. Uh, and I think they prefer targeting people who are new to the country and might not know how things work. And It is often the case here in Nanjing Tonglu, where there's a bunch of vendors that they approach you and try to sell you whatever thing they have or whatever thing you need. And I often try to talk to them in Chinese, and I think that they they get a little bit disappointed because probably they understand that they're not gonna get much from me, and they're pretty nice about it. But I think that it's a little bit annoying to walk in Nanjing Tonglu these days because there's so many solicitations here. Another thing to watch out for is the rickshaw, also known as tuk-tuk or sanwen. Especially at night. During the day, there's nothing to worry about. Most of these people are just disabled people or elderly people who use these vehicles to get from one place to another. But the thing is that whenever you go to party districts or streets full of bars and clubs, there are going to be a lot of drivers offering you their services. They're trying to take you from one place to another. The thing is that there's one catch. Many of these drivers are honest, and the thing is that there's some out there that might try to overcharge you or take you to bars where they get a 10% commission of whatever you spent there. And the thing is that they often take you to the classic bars and they might encourage you to buy like rounds for everyone, right? Especially women in the bar. And then now, before you know it, you spend way more than you intended. And then the scams involving rickshaw drivers are quite uncommon, I think. And I think that whenever they happen, they just damage the reputation of honest rickshaw drivers. Now, but before getting into a rickshaw, I think it's always important to agree on a price up front. This is especially true in areas around, party districts and streets known for clubs and nightlife. And what typically occurs is that the rickshaw drivers will quote you a low price, 20 or 30 yuan, but once you arrive to your destination, they'll suddenly demand like 50 or 60 or 100, like please 100 or something like that, and try to take you into a guilt trip. And then, when you arrive, you sometimes give in, right? Because you just want to leave and go to whatever destination you're going, right? It's a little bit frustrating because if you would have known they were going to charge you a different price, then I think you'd have never agreed to go with them, and you'd have just taken a Didi or some other car hailing app out there. I think that's why it's so important to get a SIM card, a Chinese SIM card instead of an eSIM, because what usually happens is that you get all these apps in China, which is amazing, but if you don't have a local SIM card, it means that you might not get the verification codes to open your accounts, and ultimately, you're going to have to depend on a Chinese friend. It's going to be a little bit inconvenient. So that's why it's way better just to get a Chinese local SIM card. Just get any VPN that has short-term plans or traveling plans. For example, Simple Link VPN. So yeah, that's pretty much it. This is what they look like, by the way. Usually you can fit two people there, including the driver, but I've seen three people, sometimes even more somehow. And in case you want to know how I know all these things, well, I know these things because I've spoken to very honest rickshaw drivers who've explained how things work. And look, not all drivers are scammers. The majority are hardworking people trying to make a living. But when you have conversations with them, you start learning a lot of things about the tactics some scammers use. Speaking the language also makes it harder for them to scam you, in my opinion, because, like I said before, they realize that you're not an easy target because you have invested yourself enough in the Chinese culture to understand the tricks and scams happening in China. You got to be cautious of the street vendors, not because they're going to scam you. Actually, they're harmless, but when it comes to the flower lady and the balloon lady or any person in some sort of suit trying to sell you some fluffy toy for free, then it's not for free, right? Sometimes they'll pressure you to pay after you took their gift. So, these are the things that the vendors do. If you're a couple, then they'll try to give flowers or whatever little gift to the female, and then kind of pressure the male into paying whatever thing they gave away, right? Don't fall for this, man. Just return it. Don't take anything for free. They're gonna charge you eventually. When it comes to beggars, well, it's a very different topic because I don't think beggars in China are trying to get your money by scamming you. But something that I've noticed is that there's a few, well, more than a few seasonal beggars. You know, you always see some new beggars in the streets going to the same bars and streets where there are Chinese people drinking and having fun. I guess that this is the way they make a living or try to make a living by going to these places and just begging people for money. I've noticed that they usually go with someone that is disabled. Sometimes the Chinese bring their own kids or someone else's kid into the scene, trying to resort to your compassion, right? But I don't think they'll ever try to scam you, in my opinion. I think that they're just gonna come and try to ask you for money and be very persistent. And man, this sucks because I think that sometimes if you don't get angry at them, that they're not gonna leave. And some people just try to ignore them, not even look at them. In my case, man, if I see that it's a very elderly person, I just go ahead and make a deal with them and be like, man, I'm gonna give you money once. This is my life quota. Remember my face, never approach me again, and it usually works. So be aware that by giving money to one of them, their fellow beggars might actually see you giving them money and might harass you. Or if you're gonna go to the same place again and again, they might recognize you and they might end up asking you for more money because you already gave them once, so they might want you to give them money again. So it's really up to you, but you gotta really choose carefully. Now let's talk about online dating scams. These are becoming more and more common in my opinion, especially on dating apps like Bumble, Tantan, and Tinder, because I know that there are people out there that are single and they come to China to travel solo and they are hoping to meet someone, which is totally fine. But the thing is that very often there's some very obvious red flags that people tend to ignore. For example, when it comes to guys, they get a match almost instantly when they talk to the person they match with. Then they ask them a lot of questions, questions to build rapport. What do I mean by that? I mean questions such as, oh, for how long have you been in China? Do you speak Chinese? Do you like traveling? They're just trying to assess how easy this is going to be for them, right? And sometimes these can be innocent questions, and you might think there's nothing wrong with them, but if they want to meet on the same day that they match with you, and like I would say that 10 out of 10 they're trying to scam you. And how does that work? So usually the way it works is the match will go ahead and choose the place for you. It's going to be a bar or a restaurant or KTV, and it is very likely that you're going to be the only customer or one of the very few customers inside the bar. That's another huge red flag. And what they'll do is they're going to order a bunch of things, usually without your consent, and they're going to charge you a lot of money at the end of the night. And they're probably going to get you drunk or something like that so that you don't see what's happening, right? And this is a big red flag, right? Especially they're trying to make you drink more and more. And man, usually the person who brought you to the establishment and the establishment itself are in on it. They might claim that they don't know each other, but it's usually not the case. They know exactly what they're doing. Both parties know each other. And the way for you to protect yourself is to choose the place yourself, right? And they're gonna come up with excuses. So you guys have to go to the place of their choosing, right? But man, you have to always refuse and ask them to meet at a public place, hopefully a coffee shop or something like that, or any restaurant that you know. And what happens sometimes is that, yes, if you insist on going to your place instead of theirs, they will, in retaliation, go ahead and order a bunch of stuff. Just take the leftovers back home, and leave you with a huge bill anyway, just to kind of feel like they got something out of the date because man, they won everything from you except having a date with you. So that's what it is. That's how it works. I think that multiple times people have mentioned on YouTube that you should always try to get the police involved, and yeah, it is true. Sometimes they might even threaten to call the police if you don't pay at the establishment, right? I advise you to let them call the police because, man, the police will immediately know exactly what's happening. So don't let them intimidate you with that, right? Another thing that you can do is to go back to the place if you remember where the incident happened and talk to them directly. And if you don't want to go to the police, then you can just pretend that you already went to the police and then that they asked you to go ahead and try to negotiate with them first and try to solve it amicably. Another thing you need to be careful about is the possibility of you being scammed by someone you bring home. Let's say you meet a girl, a very friendly girl online, and you decide to take her back to your place to watch Netflix. At the end of the night, after you've fallen asleep, then, let's say that she sneaks a look at your Alipay or WeChat password, and then she transfers money from your account to hers or someone else's. And the worst part is that it's very unlikely to report this to the police because be a little bit embarrassed or out of shame, you might just forget about it, right? It's a little bit awkward for a lot of people, and I think that the scammers know this very well. And that said, I think that this kind of scams are pretty rare these days, and it's more likely to happen with people you meet online rather than on the street. For example, if you meet someone on the street, they're less likely to scam you in this way because they might run into you again in the future, especially if they go to the same place over and over again, right? There's a 99% chance that nothing bad will happen in Shanghai. I think that most of the Chinese are incredibly friendly and helpful, but it's still good to be aware of these possibilities so you can protect yourself and hopefully share this information with friends and family who would like to visit Shanghai. Now, let me finish the story about how I almost got a scam with this guy named Brian, as he called himself. I know this guy is still hanging out from club to club. Now, I don't know if he's still scamming foreigners out there, but I know he pretends to be a wealthy Chinese guy, which is hilarious because he doesn't dress smart at all. He carries around what he claims are the keys of a Ferrari, but they're probably just keys that he bought on Taobao or something like that. I remember asking him where his car was, and he said, "Oh, I can't drive right now. I'm too drunk. I left it parked at Found's parking lot, and I'll get it tomorrow." Yeah, right. I remember that night when I was out with some friends. We were finally going back home, I think, because it was too late. It was like what, like 5 a.m. or something, or 5:30. Then Ryan tried to join us in a taxi, but the driver said that there was only room for 4 people, and there were five of us. So Brian, man, we were like, okay, Brian, till next time, right? But Brian insisted, "Oh no, we'll pay extra to the driver," and somehow managed to squeeze in the trunk. And then he took us to what he called a really cool place near the shore. And yeah, it was a really cool place. There were lots of yachts there. And for some reason, we thought we could just hop on one. I mean, I'm pretty sure he made it look that way. And then, but now in hindsight, it is pretty sketchy, especially because the security guard freaked out when he saw us getting out. And at one point, one of my friends started to suspect that Brian was just a con man, a scammer, and he whispered it to me. He was like, "Man, this guy seems off." And then when Brian noticed that we were feeling a little bit suspicious, then he tried to separate us into groups, the ones that trusted him and the ones that didn't trust him, and trying to isolate us from the group by saying like, "Oh, I really like these guys, but I don't like those guys." My other friends left. After that, Brian took us to another bar around 6:30 in the morning, and he started knocking on the doors of several closed bars, insisting that they were not closed. So finally, one bar opened, and the staff clearly looked like they had just woken up, and there were no other customers, and the whole situation felt so strange. I asked for the menu, and there were no prices listed. And when I asked about the cost, they were like, each shot is like 100 yuan. And I had one shot with one of the girls, but then quickly I realized something was wrong, and I just went to the bathroom to think things over. And at one point, it was just the three of us left, and me and two other friends and Brian. And then he kept getting phone calls for some reason. I don't understand why, but we found that to be extremely suspicious. And he would step out to take the calls, and it felt very off. Eventually, we decided to leave, and Brian tried to play it cool, saying, "Oh, did you guys order a taxi?" He even offered us to pay for everything. But we hadn't bought much for him. Just a few drinks at a club earlier, and later, Brian, this guy, he claimed that he was going to take us to his house, right? But at that moment, he said, "Oh, I got to go to the ATM to withdraw the cash and give it to you guys." And he even sent us a picture of an ATM with cash in hand. But clearly, he took that picture from the internet or something. We follow him to a KFC where he just disappeared through the back door, most likely. And that guy is still out there, 9 years later, scamming people and pretending to be a millionaire, luring foreigners into bars. Luckily for me, I just spent like 100 yuan, but I've had friends that have been scammed for what, 6,000 yuan, 10,000 yuan, even 20,000 yuan in one night. So anyway, if you want to see more content like this, remember to comment, subscribe, and like. Share this video with your family and friends that are planning to visit Shanghai. This was Isaac, and I'll see you next time.